Yeah, I will say that the thing that keeps me up at night is the fact that maybe I'm not a good investor, right? And so it's like, I think that's number one, is that you have, right? Because it's funny, in private equity, you kind of never really know, because the liquidation like cycle is 5 to 7 years, and so it's really hard to get that feedback on whether or not you're actually a good investor. So that's sort of the thing that keeps me up at night, and I think because that keeps me up at night, I've really focused on it, right? So like, it's very easy, I think, particularly when you're working really long hours, and I was 100% culpable of this, to turn your critical brain off. Like, you're going to be so tired, you're going to be inundated with like, move this box from this side of the PowerPoint to that side of the PowerPoint. And so, a lot of the time your gut instinct is just to turn the critical part of your brain off. And that is the biggest mistake that you can make, because you miss a ton of learning experiences in that process. And I definitely was probably culpable of that for a little bit, but I remember going through the lateral recruiting process for private equity. So it was like, now it's crazy. Now it's like a month into people's banking careers. But for me, it was like 6 months into my banking career. And I had a guy in my class, this guy named Dylan. And so he and I would sit for hours, like at the end of every day, and we would like debate things, or we would debate models, or we would like look at 10Ks. And it's just like, you have this, I think the amazing thing about this industry is you have all these other like-minded people that are just as crazy and intense as you are. And that's not a given, right? And so like, when you're in your class at Goldman or Morgan or, PJT, like whatever the bank is that you're working at, you have these amazing kids that are in the bullpen next to you that can serve as your guidepost and your partner in this process. And I think it's a lot more fun to engage that part of your brain when you have someone to do it with. And then I think the other thing too is like, when you're particularly junior, you feel weird asking questions. And here's why, because like, there are some questions that I think you can probably answer on your own. So it's just like, go do some reading, like you can figure out why an industry works, whatever it is. But then there are like questions where it's like, it really does help to get someone who's been around perspective. So first of all, make sure you're learning the difference between those two types of questions. But then whenever you have these questions that are like, you truly need the insight of someone who's been in the space, ask the people that you're working with, right? And I think like this goes back to my answer from before, which is like the establishing the good relationships. I had one partner in particular that I worked for at Goldman, and I would just ask him questions all the time. It's like, well, why is it that way? Like, why is it that, right? And so it's like, that growth process from asking those critical why questions ultimately sharpens that part of your brain. And it's funny because the best investors, from my perspective, from my, my lowly perch, right? The best investors are the ones that ask the simple questions. So it's funny, like the best investor I worked with at Blackstone is a consumer partner. And when he and I would go to meetings together, he'd walk in and he'd be like, okay, like basically some rendition on how does this business make money, right? And so it's like literally just paring it down to brass tacks, because people that are secure in their intelligence are not afraid to ask what is perceived as a dumb question, because at the end of the day, like if you miss something, that's on you. And so really just making sure that your eyes wide open to the blind spots of life, and just doing that throughout your career, not waiting until you get into private